Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. It has been a while. Have my friend Will here today, and we're going to do some catch up with our own private lives, some maybe observations about what's going on in the world. We want to update you with what we've been doing in the book and make some recommendations for maybe some of you who want to follow along with a few of the pieces that we've been reading. So, Will, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Doug. A lot of water under the bridge since our last show together, and I've renovated a house and moved to the country, and I've been confirmed into the Catholic Church as of about 3 weeks ago. So I'm receiving the Eucharist, made my first confession, and I'm feeling good about things.
Excellent. So I'm in a different place here, and I'm Catholic, so I don't believe we've done a video since we've both been Catholic. So let's race through this part. We can talk about this maybe later or another video. It was a long slog for me. I was very excited to get through Catholic initiation. Had some great experiences. It was all very positive to me. I was received into the church Easter this year, and it's been going great. I love it, and I bet you had a largely positive experience as well.
Sure, yeah, it wasn't free from trials, but yeah, once I feel like there was a pressure kind of hanging over me, especially as I got closer to the day in which I did my first confession, and then shortly after there, I was received into the church. But I was trying to move at the same time, finish renovating a house, like I said. So very high pressure time in my life, but now I feel like I've made it out of the tunnel to the other side, and I'm where I wanted to be. So
Yeah, how Will has accomplished what he did between literally building the dang house or rebuilding the house and everything else he's been juggling. It's pretty amazing. And keeping up on these very esoteric readings that we've been doing. One of the things that I want to just jump into that everybody's trying to get a handle on what's going on today. Well, what's new with that? Aren't we always, all of us, trying to get some kind of handle on what's going on today? It is a confusing time, obviously. One of the things we've been doing is looking at where the world is right now in accordance to the story of the church itself. And I don't want to get into typology too much right now, but the church is Christ. Christ is the church. And typologically, it is sort of repeating the story of Christ himself. And it's difficult not to think that this is a story of a fruit that is kind of nearing its completion on the branch. And I, about a year ago, mentioned Vigano. So he's always a real hot button. So we've had plenty of time to, look at anything involving Vigano. We've made a couple videos about Vigano. Just so you know where we're at with Vigano, it is a starting point in the book that we have, because he came on the scene and he's making this observation. There's this thing called a great reset. And our question really had to do more with this proposition that we have, is that we're in the midst of an ontological warfare of forces trying to define or redefine reality. So that's what we're really after, is what is truth, what is reality, what does Vigano add to this? So it's exciting to have this voice when seemingly every character in high positions in the world seemed to be silent about the Great Reset. We had somebody being quite vocal. And as I mentioned last time, there are some highly problematic things with Vigano, not to pull this out too much. And he's still making some really good, he's always on the scene doing something, but ultimately we don't lean on Vigano in our book. He is a talking point to begin it, but we go down another path entirely that we can talk about. Will, when you're looking at the world today, it is funny because the crisis in the church really does seem to be the crisis in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah, certainly. And what we have preserved in the Catholic Church is the teachings that were laid out by the apostles who handed them on to the church fathers. We have a definite historical record of this is what was taught, this is what was believed, and this is how we structured our liturgies to reflect that, and what we believe about, the Eucharistic sacrament, and what we believe about the typologies of the Bible. And here's how we read the Bible, and here's how we understand prophecy and eschatology. So what we have in the Catholic Church throughout time, the Catholic tradition, is a historical consciousness of how Christianity has affected absolute reality, how it set up a structure for understanding, what it means to live in this, valley of tears between the transcendent and the imminent reality of daily life. We have now appearing, in the Great Reset, Newspeak, this concept of mixed reality, where we have the constructed and the mediated, and we have the reality out there that's mundane that we experience every day, and this kind of blending and twisting of these things, so that our perceptions are skewed, and we don't really know where the source of authority or truth is flowing from.
Wow, good. Yeah. Part of our proposition here in seeing through the metaverse is that the metaverse is a new operating platform that's going to replace the old operating platform. And by operating platform, it's the circuitry that gives life meaning and purpose that was found in Western civilization through the Catholic social organization. So yes, if we think of Christ being reality or Christ being truth, when Christ became incarnate, he changed the landscape, the conscious landscape of the world, and the idea of an extra cosmic being was a very difficult notion for people to grasp. But in short, what the Catholic social order allows us to see is Christ as he is in an objective reality. It's through balancing these lenses, one being immanent and one being transcendent. And because God created a religion for our mediation, for this purpose, so we could properly see him as he is, the Catholic social order does that. We have the transcendent, of course, we could call it the eschaton, the beatific vision that we hold in the Mass. But at the same time, Christ died in history. So for Catholics, matter matters. And we have a sacramental economy, but in order to see Christ clearly, especially over time, so we don't go chasing waterfalls, we have to somehow stay in the medici, and it's a very tricky spot. It's a very mysterious spot. But one eye has to be on the transcendent, and one part of our being has to remain here in the physical, where Christ nailed himself to history and lives through his church. Thoughts, Will?
Yes, and a couple of different things that come to mind are the way that the Catholic Mass is presented as the unbloody sacrifice of Christ on Calvary. So it capitulates the Old Testament Levitical priesthood sacrificial blood sacrificial system, and it fulfills it in a way that conjoins our own offering and participation in the Mass with it. So we're fused into the mystical body of Christ. Like when you say Christ is nailed into history through the church, there's this concept of a mystical body, which is parodied by this notion of the Internet of Bodies, or the Metaverse, as being this encapsulating meta consciousness or neural network that conjoins all humanity together. The mystical body is a spiritual and immanent convocation of consciousness across time, so inside and outside of time, that binds the saints, the laity, to the within the body of Christ.
Right. And the metaverse is the inversion of that convocation.
Right.
Yeah. So we can think of it. I think in the modern world, one thing that's happened in the last couple of years is that there's a book that came out in 1987 by Alan Bloom called The Closing of the American Mind, that I read it at the time, but I didn't quite get it. But he's talking about the world of the Platonic forms. And really the Reformation is a slow process of just separating ourselves from this reality. So when you think of the Greco-Roman world at the time of the first century, everybody would have been, this would have been part of everybody's consciousness, these Platonic forms that existed separate from our reality, but they were conjoined to our reality. So the idea, I've always had problems with this idea, but for simplicity's sake, let's say there's an idea of ideal truth or justice or beauty. So Christianity is completely within this milieu of Christian realism, that these forms are real, they're more realer than our reality. So Christ himself, when the word was made flesh, the word is sort of like a meta type of all these Platonic types. He comes in and as a living being, he embodies and yet transcends all of the forms in one walking, living, breathing individual. So it's a heavy idea, but it's hard to kind of get the case for Christ in his church and where it's going right now without seeing the Christ as the realization of this totality of forms. And of course, that is why Christ's church is the fulfillment of the old covenant. So the church is Israel, the church is Jesus fulfilled until he comes again. In the meantime, that's the struggle, is that, look there, it's hard to stay and see Christ as he is, as the complete fulfillment of all of these Platonic types. And when we immanentize the eschaton, we try to take those beautiful types that are separate from our reality, and then we try to have that experience or that joy or that fulfillment now. And this is the source of political and social derailment we have been arguing thus far, and we're going to continue to argue. Will, any ideas?
So this Platonic realism concept, it presents, nature or truth, and human nature particularly, as being fixed. So,
absolutely.
So it's not this evolutionary process or this thing that's fluid and shifting according to situational
Permanent
things. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're permanent types, transcendent, so they're outside of our reality that we have access to, but in a kind of subservient way. What seems to appear in the Middle Ages is, and around the time of the Protestant Reformation, is a Neoplatonic, Kabbalistic system that wants to harness these types, but make them into these vessels that can be filled with fluid meanings, or they can be bent and shaped. And it seems to be, an aspect of alchemy or of tarot or, Kabbalah, is to this nominalist project of mixing reality, like the tarot. It appears to be, it's called the quest of our hero through these different archetypes of authority, roles of authority. So you start from the magician and you end up with the fool, and you go through the Pope and the Emperor, and it's like it seems that through meditating on these typologies, or perverting them or parodying them, then we can somehow shift the balance, and that's encoded into reality.
Right, and that's what heresy is perverting the types, and that we argue leads to social and political derailment.
But heresy against what?
What?
Heresy against what?
That's the order, and so that is the order of the ages. Is that the question with any crisis of any age is a question of authority and legitimacy, and so you get that from the church, but they always require permanent forms and hierarchy. And without those, you're going to be on a slippery slope into what we say parroting the permanent types. And this is egregore creation. And egregores are a simulacron of reality. And of course, the metaverse is, it's not just a single egregore, which is sort of a false reality, but it's a sort of a meta egregore. It's an imitation of the mystical body of Christ in toto is the metaverse. So once you walk into that reality, and I have an idea, Will, when that might come. So we've been following a lot. We can get to vegano in a second, but a lot of prophecies, Catholic prophecies, point in one direction, especially intriguing things like the third secret of Fatima. But what seems to be there, and the church is kind of held back on this because it's sort of dangerous territory, but the church does seem to go into an eclipse according to these prophecies. And the church repeats the life of Christ because it is, in typological terms, it is the life of Christ. And so it extends throughout the world. It's evangelical. It's, it had a great period of birth and Western civilization. And now it's kind of going toward another phase of atrophy and even death. And most prophecies point to this time of there might be an anti-pope and so forth, but that the church is kind of eclipsed. And we do see that in the book of Revelations, the eclipse, but the idea that the church is virtually invisible, because that's one thing about this church, is it's supposed to have a visible presence. Christ is present in the church until the end of the age. So I think this point when the church becomes kind of invisible, and I think it's a short period, it would probably be the equivalent of 3 days in the tomb. And it's at that time, I believe, that the medici becomes seemingly the operating system for all consciousness, and all people have given itself over. So what I have to say about this, because of course it's the Catholic Church is a target of everybody, Eastern Orthodox, truthers, Protestants, agnostics. Nobody's crazy about it, right? It gets it from every side. But it did have a time when it was undeniably majestic and beautiful. But at this time in the life of Christ, that is to say, the life of the church here, Christ is battered by financial abuse, battered by Catholics leaving the church, battered by a lack of faith, battered by sexual and financial scandal, and Christ is hanging on the cross, and he's disfigured, and just like his own followers, most have left him. And I believe that this is what the church is going through right now. And as the Council of Trent said, this body has both wheat and tares. It has a human element and a divine element. And the divine element will never go away. But people can't see it there. They see this battered body, disfigured body, and everybody wants to hightail it and be anywhere they can but the foot of the cross. And I believe that if this speaks to anybody, this is why people have to walk in faith toward Christ's church and his sacraments. They're still present in the church. It's a question of our faith. But so many, the Protestants and whomever else, if you are all that, come down from that cross if you are the Son of God, if you are God himself, because it just doesn't look like the way we want to see God right now. So yeah, a big theme of this is this millennialism that is a perennial problem since the first century, which is the idea that people take this idea, this golden age, and pull it down, and it leads to social derailment always. So the church is in crisis right now, of course. It's problematic that the Vatican is promoting the great agenda, the Great Reset agenda. We will begin our book with Vigano, who I talked about a year ago, just as a talking point, because he is one of the few voices in the world today that is kind of calling out the Great Reset. And so it is a calling to us in terms of this question of ontological warfare. Why do some people like Vigano see this and other people do not? So I want to introduce right now for us. So we're going to use Vigano, and then that's it. We're kind of done with him. We have issues right now with the landscape of the social universe and the talking heads and so forth, and we can go into that. But Vigano is way too problematic, although he says some great things here and there. Who Will and I have found, and that we're going to integrate into our work, is the work of Father Dennis Fahey, a number of his works, but in particular, The Social Kingship of Christ and the Conversion of the Jews. So he says all of the things that in a perfect world, Vigano would be saying right now. And he's saying all the things that other Catholics are not saying and nobody else is. So there is a treasure trove of centuries of great sources calling out the Great Reset in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. Catholicism is full of these sources. They just don't get much exposure. So a lot of what we're doing is the idea of the social kingship of Christ, and that the metaverse is the inversion of this plan, perfect inversion. So if anybody is kind of tracking with us or interested in that, Father Dennis Fahey, he's got a number of books about the reorganization of society. One final point I want to highlight. We're not talking about going back to the Middle Ages. He said we want to put the seeds out of these principles. The book we're talking about was written in 1952, toward the end of his life. And it just feels like it was written in 2022 in terms of just explaining precisely who, what, where, why is going on. And I will argue that people that kind of want to say they're above trutherism and flying high over here, it is important to identify some of the evils in the world today and lay it at the doorstep of certain groups of people. Fahey very much does that, but he does it in a systematic way of saying that this conspiracy of naturalism, or sometimes he calls it organized forces of naturalism. For Fahey, it really doesn't matter if you're talking about Masons, Zionism, or communism. They are organized forces of naturalism. Of course, he does identify more specifically who these are. And this is it's the rewinding of the social kingship of Christ. And that is what the metaverse is, and all the associated features of the circular economy and the, in the Great Reset plan. So with Fahey, the three principal people we're working with are the mystic Tomberg, who is really, we specializing especially in the idea of egregore. For Tomberg, egregore creation is something that occurs outside of the Catholic social order. Of course, we're still working with Eric Voegelin, and he's creating the idea from Plato of the metaxy and how to remain in the metaxy, balancing the immanent and the transcendent, and that happens inside of the Imperium, or the social Catholic order. Will, what are some ideas you have in terms of what's going on in the world today and how we're working with this?
Sure. Yeah. As you start off talking about Vigano and what makes him problematic, and so many people in the world of information, truth, and how this plays out in terms of theology, eschatology, and faith, is so many can't identify for either reasons of their business model, or for fear of being marginalized, who's really at work. They may identify one piece and say, Freemasonry has invaded and infiltrated the Catholic Church. That's a popular meme right now, but they can't really stand back and say, what are the eschatological goals of Freemasonry and who's really pulling the strings within that organization. One of the brilliant things in Fahey is in exposing the organized forces of naturalism, the occult, esoteric conspiracy against Christ Church, is he reveals how fundamental to absolute reality the Catholic truth is, and how the conspiracy is organized specifically against the Catholic social order and Catholic theology, not against Luther, not against Calvin, not against Wesley. It's organized against, not against Trump. It's organized against this mystical body of Christ and the hermeneutics and teachings of the Catholic Church. And he says that the Masonic rites and degrees are actually based upon three things: the Jewish Kabbalah, Near East esoteric traditions, and parodies of the Catholic teachings and Catholic ceremonies. So there has to be some ontological truth within this Catholic order in order for it to be the center of focus, the center of the bullseye, as we've called it before, for the organized conspiracy. Likewise, the Jesuits. There are some brilliant Jesuit documents, one particularly from the 1890s, which maybe we could post in the comments here, about the Jewish peril in Europe. And it's like Fahey, it sounds like it was written today, and it predicts the Bolshevik Revolution and the establishment of the nation in the Middle East and the control of all the things that you've dealt with. But we have this idea of the Jesuits, who appear like they have now become the most progressive wing of the Catholic Church. They would be also in the center of that bullseye for infiltration and corruption. But then also on the same side of the truther world, they're being presented as though they're the organized force of conspiracy that has led to where we are today. And that's just a mixed, total mixed reality there.
Right, because what we're getting at is, well, I think some people are ready for it, but it's a critique of the liberal order, and that's America, from its founding. And of course, that's problematic for the concept of the Christ kingship. For Fahey, and people like Lefebvre and so forth, the problem with liberalism is that it's eventually going to bring us to the Great Reset. Sovereignty of the people is relativism, and this is what it leads us to. So, do we go back to the Middle Ages and Fahey saying, no, you have these principles that are out there. So to bring back reality, to bring back truth, or to bring back stability the best we can do is pull on these threads of the social order that still exist. The most powerful they could be are pieces of the sacramental economy that have been left to us. And this will pull back, and that doesn't sound like a great solution, but it's a lot better than just pray. That literally scripture tells us that when things are becoming, the reason things fall apart is because of deracitation. We've been severed from our head, from the hierarchy and the authority and legitimacy of the church. We're trying to make it our own from the fumes of what was left. And so this is sort of the wreckage that remains, but we are still able to return to certain aspects of tradition that will restore, to some sense, stability and purpose in the world. Am I getting that right? Well, does that sound like a?
Yeah, I think you hit on the head right there. I think that's where we were trying to get to. Maybe we can leave a little bit more on the bone for next time and wrap it up here if you'd like.
Yeah, that sounds good. Because it is, well, praying about it's good, but this idea of we're asked to return to tradition, and we can, many of us can do that wherever we're at, even independent of whatever philosophic or religious beliefs we have, that we can hold on to the traditions of Western civilization. whatever features they may be, because the plan right now to put in a new operating system would be a complete severing of the hierarchy of Western civilization as we have understood it. And that's what links the heavens and the earth. But that's about what I got for today. I really wanted just to update with people. We're still around. We're Catholic now, and we are, I think, going pretty well. We're several chapters into the book, and we hope to be productive over the next couple of months. And we want to update you, and going through the rites of initiation. It is, a lot of this is private time, and there's a lot of time to process. So in addition to kind of adjusting and moving around to different houses, that's what we've been up to. But we're very excited about the project that we're doing, right, Will? We are excited?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think
It's coming together. You've got several
I
chapters
really
here that
think
are
it just,
very solid.
so many times that we're just saying, oh my God, the headlines today are totally talking about, what our thesis. So it's exciting, and we want to more regularly check in with you all and let you know where we're at. So final thoughts, Will?
Yeah, as you said, current events. I just I know I hadn't asked you yet about if you'd seen the Jared Kushner interview where he mentions his generation will be the first that live forever, with Richard Grinnell. It's being one of those cases that I don't think it's going to make it into Vigano's perspective of where we're at in the Great Reset struggle. But yeah, I think that goes back to the seed war concept that you've been exploring since your previous book. And maybe we can get into that next time, like how this aspect of the seed war, the medicsy, dual perspective, how these things can
inform. There is this idea of a pendulum shift coming up here. I'm actually just getting, I've been sick for a week of, I guess I got the big C, so it kind of affects my brain a little bit. I'm recovering slowly. But yes, the idea that there'll be a rise in reaction against the Great Reset and eating bugs and all this stuff. And there would be a rise of this sort of post-millennial conservative
dominionist
belief system. And of course, that's opposed to the Catholic Church and the proper placement of the millennial kingdom. So who knows what kind of dramatic shifts might happen in the months coming up. But that is the purpose of the Catholic social order, that we can properly stay in the medicsy and keep our eyes on objective truth through balancing the immanent and the transcendent. And in topsy-turvy times when people are kind of in an emotional state and they want certainty and they want to balance everything that's so messed up that's been going on, it's going to kind of be an additional layering of this. Now, to the extent that the cabal is in charge of this, or they're out of, who knows? One thought I might have on the topic, I certainly don't believe that this is all supernatural and we can just kind of write this off and this dumb trutherism, because I think truth is important. But I think that the way that this needs to be balanced is through being mindful of the order, the social order that was left to us for a purpose, so that our time between the first and second millennial, we're focused on what we need to be focused on. And here we are. So unless you have any final thoughts, Will, I think let's shut this sucker down.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Hey, y'all, I missed you. And it's, I just hope you all are doing well. This has been Dr. Deep State. Thanks for tuning in, and I miss you guys.
Bye.